Tonight's Daily Difference, crime and punishment. Federal prosecutors are taking extreme precautions in reputed mob boss John Gotti's current trial to block any jury tampering. Why? Well, a juror in a Gotti trial almost 5 years ago was arrested Sunday, charged with soliciting a bribe for acquittal. NBC's John Miller broke the story.
The jury members in John Gotti's latest trial are being kept under tight wraps. They are brought to court in a caravan of limousines, shielded from view by tinted glass, guarded by U.S. Marshals. John Gotti, the reputed boss of the Gambino crime family, got the nickname Teflon Don because he's been acquitted in the last 3 straight cases. Today, George Pape, a member of one of the juries that acquitted Gotti in 1987, was indicted, charged with helping Gotti fix that case. The FBI learned that Pape was friendly with Bosco Radonjic, a New York mobster. They learned that from Sam Gravano, Gotti's former right-hand man, who has now agreed to testify against Gotti in this trial. Gravano says that Gotti sent $60,000 in cash to pay off George Pape, who was juror number 11, a payoff to make sure that Gotti wasn't convicted. The feds remember that day as Friday the 13th, when John Gotti was found not guilty. Pape read the verdict. Now sources tell NBC News that Gotti has a network of operatives ready to go to work whenever he's in trouble with the law. Sam Gravano has told the FBI that Gotti authorized a $10,000 cash payoff to a man who he allegedly beat up. In fact, Romuald Pisick told the judge in open court he couldn't remember who hit him, and then the charges against Gotti were dropped.
I know you didn't believe I was guilty.
In another trial, Gotti was charged with ordering the shooting of a union leader. Secret tapes made in Gotti's headquarters recorded him asking Gravano to reach out for a member of the jury. In that case, the jury was housed briefly in a hotel that was a regular hangout for some of Gotti's own hitmen. When authorities realized their blunder, the jury was moved to new quarters. Not that it much mattered. Gravano has told federal agents that Bill Peist, one of the very detectives assigned to guard that jury, was on Gotti's payroll. In the current Gotti trial, authorities are determined to keep the jurors hidden. They are an anonymous jury, and they are kept in a hotel away from outsiders. Even family visits are monitored by U.S. Marshals. Federal authorities believe in this case they have the evidence to prove that John Gotti really isn't the Teflon Don, that instead he is Mr. Fix-It, something they say won't happen in this trial. John Miller, NBC News, New York.
Tonight's Daily Difference, crime and punishment. John Miller has been covering the murder and racketeering trial of reputed mob boss John Gotti here in New York. John's here to tell us how Gotti got to the top. John?
Stone, to understand John Gotti's rise to the top in the nation's largest crime family, you have to know the legacy of bosses before him, back more than 30 years to the days of Murder Incorporated. Albert Anastasia, the boss of Murder Incorporated, was wiped out by 4 gunmen who went down in mob lore as the Barbershop Quartet. The boss of bosses who would emerge to take over was a kinder, gentler Don. Carlo Gambino's reign was so long and comparatively peaceful that the family he controlled eventually assumed his name, and so became the Gambino crime family. It was in this element that a young hood began his climb. They called him Johnny Boy.
Informants were providing information about this sort of powerful, young, charismatic leader in Queens, and I think people recognized him as a future power within the Gambino crime family.
He became a made member of the family by murdering a man who had kidnapped and killed Gambino's nephew. Gotti did 2 years for that hit, and when he got out, he began to leave his Queens haunts, coming here to the Little Italy section of Manhattan, to the Ravenite Social Club. In those years, it was a place to be if you were a young, tough Gambino mobster.
The types of people who went to the Ravenite Social Club were the tough guys in the Gambino crime family. They were engaged in loan sharking, in gambling, in truck hijackings, organized robberies. They generated millions of dollars for the Gambino crime family.
Gotti was taken under the tutelage of a ruthless old gangster named Agnello Della Croce. The name translated means Little Lamb of the Cross. Della Croce was a member of the mob's commission. When rival mob boss Carmine Galente was hit, these videotapes show Della Croce was briefed personally. John Gotti, as Della Croce's protege, was in a good position to rise in the family. Gotti had a good life. He ran hijacking at Kennedy Airport, gambling and loan sharking in Queens, and he had his own colorful crew. There was Gotti's brother, Gene, and there was Angelo. Angelo Ruggiero. They called him Quack Quack, because as you can see, he rarely stopped talking. In fact, Angelo's mouth set into motion Gotti's bloody rise to power. By now, Paul Castellano had succeeded the late Carlo Gambino as boss. He had one rule: no drugs. The penalty was death, and Quack Quack knew it. Ruggiero was picked up on bugs talking about heroin deals with Gotti's brother and others from the crew. The FBI says Angelo and Gene Gotti were going to be killed. Only Della Croce could buy them time. But Della Croce died of cancer. The FBI says that's when Gotti made his move. 2 weeks later, Paul Castellano was wiped out in front of Sparks Steakhouse, and John J. Gotti emerged, the new boss. The name Gotti can be confused with Gatti, the Italian word for cat. He's outlived one mob contract and 3 trials. As a jury begins to deliberate on his 4th next week, he's a man who could use 9 lives. Stone?
Thanks, John.
Good evening. This time, the wise guy smirk disappeared. John Gotti, the modern godfather, the so-called Teflon Don. He always escaped the big convictions in the past, but not today. Guilty of murder and racketeering, 12 counts, and now facing a long time in jail. NBC's expert on the mob is John Miller. He's at the federal courthouse in Brooklyn tonight where the verdict was announced. John?
Well, Tom, John Gotti's 7-year reign as the boss of America's largest Cosa Nostra family made him the best-known gangster since Chicago's Al Capone. It also made him a big target. In a hushed courtroom, Gotti sat and heard the forelady of an anonymous jury say guilty. Gotti and his co-defendant were charged with being boss and underboss of the Gambino crime family. The best evidence that Gotti was a mob boss came from his own mouth over FBI bugs.
This is going to be a Cosa Nostra till I die. Be it an hour from now, be it tonight, or 100 years from now when I'm in jail. It's going to be a Cosa Nostra.
During the 6-week trial, the jurors heard Gotti's threats.
You tell this punk, me, John Gotti, to sever your mother head off.
The conversations were backed up by videotapes that showed that Gotti was close to the cast of characters the jury only heard about on the tapes. And they saw how close Gotti was to Sammy the Bull Gravano. He was promoted from consigliere to underboss while the FBI listened in.
So I'm asking you, how you feel? You want to sing this good here? Or you want me to make you official underboss, acting boss?
Prosecutors made a deal with Gravano. There must be no honor among thieves because Gravano took the stand and impassively testified for days, linking Gotti to each murder and telling the jury how he and Gotti planned and then watched the hit on mob boss Paul Castellano.
The jury did not give adequate consideration to the defense arguments, did not give more than that, adequate consideration to the evidence.
He took it like a real man, and he has vowed that the fight is not over, ladies and gentlemen, and it's not.
Today, another milestone in the fight against organized crime. The Teflon is gone, the Don is covered with Velcro, and every charge in the indictment stuck.
It's been a long road. Justice has been served, and it feels awfully good. Thank you.
He didn't win fair and square. He played a game that he didn't play fair and square. My father is the last of the Mohegans. They don't make men like him anymore, and they never will.
Okay, John Gotti convicted here of RICO counts, including 5 murders. They carried 20 years apiece. It is likely at the time of sentencing on June 23rd that John Gotti will be sent away to federal prison for the rest of his natural life. Tom?
John Miller, what about the future of the mob? Do federal authorities believe that they've now busted it?
Well, certainly here in New York, where we have the 5 most influential Cosa Nostra families in the country, those families are now on the ropes. 4 of the 5 crime bosses are now in jail or awaiting trial, and the 5th, of course, is being targeted. So the mob in New York is on the ropes right now.
And what about the future of Sammy the Bull Gravano, the man who turned state's evidence and ratted on his former boss, John Gotti? What happens to him now?
Well, Sam Gravano has to cooperate as part of his agreement, testifying in New York and around the country if the Justice Department desires for the next 2 years. During that time, he'll be in federal custody, and when he's in a jailhouse setting, it'll be in what they call a rat jail, a place where cooperating witnesses are kept. That's mob slang for those kind of places. But after that, he'll go into the witness protection program, and the program's history shows if you play by the rules, you'll make it okay.
All right, thank you very much. John Miller tonight in Brooklyn at the courthouse where John Gotti was found guilty today.